and we're going to crack on. Not a huge number of things this month, but actually there's more than I anticipated, which is quite nice. I was thinking December might be really quiet, but actually it's just not. It's not been particularly quiet at all, I wouldn't say. I'm sharing the tab, and I should hopefully be able to come back here and use the. I've got Carl joining us. Okay, let me go back to the page 1. I'm actually sharing my tab, so you can't see this, but actually, and I did mention this last month, but there's now a transport bar inside the Google Meet. So you can work through the slides from within Google Meet. It appears in the bottom right hand corner. I'll take a little screenshot of it, and we can send the screenshot round so you can see how it looks. And we send the stuff around. You'll see the little transport bar. It's really neat that you can stay inside the Meet. So if you're doing any kind of online training with staff or students, whatever, you don't need to be in your slide deck running. You can actually be inside the Meet, which is fantastic. So that was 2 months ago. So thank you very much for coming along. This is the virtual staff room, January 2023, and these are the updates from last month. And I'm just going to go through that. I've added a couple of other things in additionally, just to kind of make you aware. These aren't necessarily the updates that I get in my inbox, but updates that I'm aware have been happening from around the Google world. So just for you to be aware of it. First one, these came out of the EDU in 90 updates that they do on YouTube. And there are 3 things in there that are definitely worth thinking about. There's 2 new Chromebook resources. There's a lot of kind of repeat across the 2. They are very similar in terms of some of the content, but not all. One is basically encouraging a teacher that's new to Chromebooks to go through and work through a little course to get more familiar with how a Chromebook works and what they need to do. And that includes some of the accessibility features. I think I'm a particular fan of all the accessibility features and how easy they are to use. So that's definitely worth looking at, those first 2 resources. The second one is an addition to the arts and culture offering that Google gives you. If you're not aware of arts and culture, I really, really strongly recommend that you show it to as many members of staff as you can. There will definitely be something in there for your staff in some areas, because it's not just about pretty pictures and sculptures and all that kind of stuff. Of course, all that's in there, but of course it gives you a cultural reference for a whole range of other subjects. But it does foods now, so you can do the Japanese food, Portuguese food. They keep adding more in. There might be many more than that by now. I haven't checked recently. And there's lots of videos of things to cook. There's historic places, historic events, historic people. And you can do searches like women in computing, for example, and so on and so forth. So there's a whole load of kind of massive web canvases where they've collated all these cultural resources into one place that can add kind of extra breadth and depth to any course that you might do. So I really, really encourage you to use arts and culture. There's definitely going to be something for any subjects at all, right across the courses that you might well offer. So it's definitely worth considering to look at and getting your staff to use. So please do. Have I encouraged people enough to use arts and culture? Do you get the sense I really like it? There is also a mobile app for arts and culture, which is really great as well. So do please make use of it. And you can create favorites and share your favorites lists. So you don't have to have kids searching through absolutely everything. If you've got very young children, you don't want them looking at naked bottoms and getting excited, then you can just create a list of favorites and just share that with them. So there's lots in there to recommend. So do please go and have a look at that. And particularly now, because there's more and more Ukrainians appearing in the country, isn't it? You might be glad of the chance to share some of that culture within your classes with your students, and your Ukrainian refugees might also be very pleased that you're doing that. So do please consider it. So that's just a few extra bits that came out of the EDU in 90 that goes into YouTube. On that same Google for Education channel on YouTube, there are now a whole series of really short videos about kind of issues in education from the viewpoint of a range of kind of education leaders and thought leaders in education right around the world now. There are 8 of them now. There were 4 before Christmas, and I just checked this morning and I did the other 4 in. Simon Lewis, he's actually one of our customers. He works for Education First in Carlow in Ireland, and we've done some work with him. But they're just really nice little conversation starters that you could use in CPD to start begin a conversation about wider issues if you've got particular focus and things. So they are all definitely worth having a think about and having a look at. So the ones on the left are each of the individual ones. So if there's someone you particularly know want to go and listen to, then you can do that. But the full playlist is the link on the right. And the series is called Teaching for Tomorrow. So there's just some really nice little short kind of thought pieces, if you like, that you might well use in any CPD that you've got coming up. So do have a look at them, and so they're, like I say, quick to access and really interesting to listen to. So that's those. Now let's go on to the actual updates that came into the inbox. And this is the first one. I think I've talked about the @ symbol at length in these sessions, and more functionality is appearing in that @ symbol. Just in case you're not aware, it started in Google Docs. So you go shift @ and then a menu appears, and it's all in the menu that appears are all the things that you might well get in the menus across the top of the page, but it just gives you that little bit easier access. And if you wanted to drop down, you just start to type drop down and a drop down appears. That same shift @ functionality is now beginning to appear more and more in Google Sheets, and you can now add in the drop down lists that were just in Google Docs. They're now available in Google Sheets, and it just seems to me a really handy little thing to be able to use it in a whole range of things. I've just put some little examples on this slide deck here, for tracking of progress across coursework and project management, self-marking quizzes. Because of course, if this was, what's 1 + 3, and there's a drop down where the student selected the correct answer, in the third column, you can actually create functions that tell them whether they're correct or wrong, because it will of course read the drop down list value that the student selected. So it allows them to self-mark and things. So there's all sorts of potential applications that you could use for that. And it's just a really nice little thing. And you can edit these drop down lists. It's showing you one here, the completed, in progress, and not completed, but you'll notice that there's a pencil icon bottom right of the little GIF, and you can then edit it, and you can put in the text for yourself, and you can color code each of them. So it's a really nice little additional bit of functionality that's now coming across into Sheets. It's been in Google Docs for a while, and hopefully will be more and more of those drop down options will appear in the Google Sheets. It just makes getting in the functions that you want that little bit quicker. So it's a great little tool. So this one isn't quite here yet, but they have announced it, I think, in order to allow you to prepare to get ready. And it's a new little bit of functionality from content managers in shared drives, and it's to allow you to share a folder. So even within a single shared drive, someone who isn't necessarily in that shared drive as a collaborator at whatever level you've chosen to make them, you can add in additional people and allow them to just share a single folder from within a shared drive. So it just gives you the scope to be a little bit more granular in the way that you share resources within a shared drive. And don't forget, and I think sometimes people do forget this, that when you've got someone in as a shared person, you can set a timer on how long they have that share option. So you can actually, once they're in there as a list, you can click on the drop down next to them and say, schedule their sharing permissions to end on the end of January. So there's someone, I don't know, for example, who's applying for a job at the college, and you want to share a job description and an application form, for example, but the application closes at the end of January. Then you add them into the share of the folder, you allow them to get to the document, you allow them to use it however they need to use it, but it times out when the application date closes, so that you don't need to go back at a later stage and remove them. Whilst you're sharing it with them, you can go in and add a date that their sharing permissions end. So it's definitely one that I think is underused, but to be aware that it's there. So to be able to do that within a Google shared drive now is really quite useful, I think. So that's great. So that's coming in February. So it shouldn't actually be here yet, but I don't know why they've announced it this early, but they have. I thought I would include it anyway. This is a new one. I've not had a chance to share this test this properly because I've not been on a slide deck since I've read about it. But basically, you click on the faces at the top, and you can actually follow a colleague inside a Google slide deck as they work through the slide deck. So if you're working on a project together and this is a presentation about that particular project, and you're working, you're on a meet with them, for example, then you can click on the follow button and you can follow them through the slide deck as they move from slide to slide, and it automatically moves you forward to the next slide. So it's really quite, I mean, you've always been able to follow them because you've been able to see where they were, because you can actually see their little icon on the slide sorter tool on the left there. But actually this automatically moves you along, which is quite nice. So it saves you having to keep clicking to keep moving from slide to slide. You tell them to follow and it follows you from slide to slide, so you both know you're talking about the same slide. So that's really a nice little functionality, not one I ever requested, but a great one now it's here, so that's nice to see. So that's that one. This one is Education Plus only, so those of you who are subscribing to the Education Plus Google Workspace accounts, this one will apply to you, and it's the option to add in chunks of code really simply. And I think there's 5 different types: Java, C++, I can't remember what the other ones are now, JavaScript, Python, I can't see them, it happens too quick. There's about 5 options in there. My suspicion is more might well appear at a later stage, but for the moment there are 5, and I'm presuming they're working with the 5 most common. So you have been able to add code in before, but you've had to go through and add in all the kind of indenting and things, whereas now you can actually add it straight in and do all the indenting. So the layout and look of it is in a much easier to see and use interface. And then, like any Google Doc, you've got all the usual sharing permissions, so you've got all the benefits that come with that. So if you're someone who teaches computer studies of any kind, that's, I think, is a really useful additional tool to be able to do that. So that's code in Google Docs. This is one that's being added to Google Chat now, that when you do a search in Google Chat, you get the smart chips. Smart chips, again, have been here for quite some time. They're in your Google Drive, they're in your Google Meet, not Google Meet, in your Google Drive, in your Google Mail. And when you do a search, you get a whole series of smart chips appear that allow you to do a more complex search. The smart chips are all those things that have always appeared in an advanced search in things like Mail, for example, and Drive, but it just saves you clicking on that advanced search button. It just automatically populates them. And I don't know if you've clocked this. If you, for example, you select document as has attachment rather in a Gmail smart chip, it then changes to a document type, so you can then specify even further about what particular type of document it is that you're searching for. So the smart chips are actually smart in that they change and customize based on the options that you make. And there are now, you can see on the left, I've just literally copied and pasted the list that's there. So you can specify who it's from, what was said, date, whether it's got a file, whether it's got a link, and whether it mentions you particularly. So you've got kind of 6 search chips that you can actually use to filter with a little bit more accuracy to find that particular conversation within chat. A really welcome addition, I think, because we use chat a huge amount. We find it enormously useful, both chat and spaces, both internally and with customers. We use it as an additional support for training when we deliver training over a long period of time. And Jason at RNN has used it with us. We've kind of had long-going chats with them, both with the wider team and also with Jason's quality team and things. So we use them really extensively. So to be able to filter out what could be a potentially very long discussion and chat to find something, rather than have to endlessly scroll or hope Control F will find it for you, is actually, I think, a really great addition. And I think we'll certainly be making use of it pretty extensively, if we're not already. So that's now within Google Chat. This one is in there because it's on the list. There are now some filter effects available in Google Meet. I put the tree stump in because that was the image that they put in the chat, in the email about it. There's a strawberry, you turn your face into a strawberry. Thankfully, I think, and you could call me a bar humbug if you like, it is turned off by default for education accounts, because I'm not really sure that you want all your kids to turn up as strawberries or tree stumps. But they are there. I think it's much more targeted at the private Gmail market. You know, I would certainly do this kind. They did used to have it in Hangouts, didn't they? Many years ago. You could add spectacles and beards and hats to your face and things while you were chatting with your friends on Hangouts, but thankfully it went away. But they are now coming back. So if you want to be a tree stump, then you'll need to speak to your admin person about turning it on first to allow you to use it before you join a meeting as a tree stump. But there we go. Why would you not? But it's there, just to be aware that it's on its way. This one is specifically for people that use Google Voice. Google Voice, for those of you who aren't aware, is Google's voice over internet protocol phone system. It's the one when if ever you phone our landlines and my 0116 number, for example, and that's a Google Voice number, and it allows me to answer it through my device, through my Chrome device here, and through my mobile. And a significant number of the phone calls are free. They're just improving the kind of spam filtering that comes with that. It will indicate any calls that are spam with the symbol image that you see on the right there. If they suspect it's spam, it'll go straight to voicemail and it'll appear in your spam folder. If you mark it as not spam, then Google learns and then stops doing that for you. So it will automatically adjust based on any responses that you feed back into Google Voice. So it just gives you a little bit more control. And of course, if it is properly spam and it's a more automated system at the other end and it goes straight to your voicemail, of course, it won't leave a message. So it means that no one gets bothered by it all. So, but that specifically for people using Google Voice, of course. Oh, right, excuse me. So Cast Moderator. Those of you who are not aware, Google Cast have been going for a long while. It gives you the option to cast to any device just by clicking the cast button and going to it and finding the particular cast item and casting to it. But there's been an issue within schools in that actually it's not very friendly in terms of it allows anyone to cast to it because it's assumed it's a domestic device and hasn't bothered to control it. You've now got a thing called Cast Moderator. So you stick the new version of the cast, it comes with the remote control into the back. There is a setup process. The remote control has got relatively few buttons. So there's a whole series of multiple presses on one button to push it to a setup for education version. And basically what happens is that once it's set up, students can find the device, they can cast to it, but they need to put a 6-digit code in, and the teacher needs to produce that code and show it on the screen for them to see. So they can't actually cast to it and then the teacher has control about who they do allow and don't allow to cast. So it gives them a much greater level of control. You can use them as standard domestic devices. It works perfectly well. I've got one at home. I got one just so I could test it. I set it up for education. Like I said, there's a few more clicks to sort it out, but it wasn't difficult at all. One of the things to note that it will also control things like the volume on the screen. So if you've got a large, LCD display at the front with built-in speakers, I think there are 17 kind of Wi-Fi control versions for the volume. My telly is very old. I don't watch a great deal of telly, so I don't ever invest in tellies. It's a very small 21-inch small telly that only rarely gets watched. And because it's so old, none of the 17 versions to control the volume worked. But as long as the screen is reasonably modern, then you'll also be able to control volume should you want to. So that I don't think is a particular problem. But like I said, my telly is very old, so it wouldn't for me. But it's definitely worth thinking about it because it makes life much simpler. But of course, it works on the assumption that you're going to be sharing from a Chromebook rather than from a mobile device. And once you've got it set up for education, you can't then cast to it like you would if it was a domestic device. It just doesn't work that way anymore. So I had to reset mine once I tested it to be a domestic device. But it's definitely worth thinking about if you are looking at ways to cast to screens at the front of the classroom whilst you're not yourself there. This is definitely a solution that will get you to that position. And I think they're like 40, 50 quid. I mean, they're domestic products actually ultimately, but there's a education setup option on it, and the two links are a website for just about information and the setup for the specific setup for education should you want it. So that's Cast Moderator. I think it's a great solution. Literally a 6-digit code appears on the screen, kids type it in, and they of course from their Chromebooks just go to the 3 dots in the Chrome browser, click Cast, and they'll find the device and then be invited to put in a code, and can't cast until they put the code in. Excuse me. And those are they. Not a huge number, but I'm surprised there were actually that many, considering we were charging through December towards Christmas. But that was quite a nice, good number, and some really nice ones there as well. The next update for the user updates will be Monday, the 6th of February, just before half term. And those are they. Any questions about those? Any comments? Oh, you can't make comments because I've turned the comments off. Comments are back on now in case people want to make comments. If they don't want to say that, speak out loud.
No, and only things with the smart chips. I'd like to see some more, particularly in Gmail. Try, because I think they'll be really useful in there. It's good to see that they're coming out all over the place, but Gmail would be a really good one to have some more smart chips in.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. I mean, I think they're literally just scratching the surface. I think there'll be a growing range of things that will be automatable with a smart chip, which is exactly what you want to see, because it's a fractional gain, but of course, hundreds of thousands of fractional gains over a year, you're working much more efficiently, and that's what you want, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's all about that efficiency. I mean, Google still banding it about as Smart Canvas, because that's what they launched it at, didn't they? They called it Smart, Google Workspace Smart Canvas, like the whole caboodle.
Yeah, I think that's the overarching kind of broad thing, isn't it? Because there's all the predictive text, because you get those predictions for responses to messages now, don't you?
Yeah.
Both in Gmail and in chat and things. But then you also get the search chips in Docs, now in more and more in Sheets. So I think it's kind of, that's the broad overarching title for it.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, sometimes a bit confusing because they've got the Canvas app. Which I use for taking notes on a Chromebook. I use it all the time. It's great.
Yeah.
But that's not in the family. It's a shame, really, because it's really useful.
Yeah, no, I've not used it myself, but I'm aware of it. Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
Yeah, no, the Canvas app is really good for note taking. Where you can. Well, we've got 360-degree Chromebooks, so we fold them, hold it like a tablet, write on it, save them as PDFs.
Have you had a go on Miro inside a Meet yet?
Sorry?
Have you noticed that in the apps in a Google Meet, you've now got a Miro?
Yes.
It's like Google. It's like a Jamboard on steroids. It's just got loads of ready-made templates, which I haven't particularly used.
Yeah, it's like a whiteboarding app, isn't it, Miro?
Yeah.
Been around a long time. I know Promethean have partnered with Everything Everywhere now.
Oh, have they?
I think it's called Everything Everywhere, EE.
Yeah, no, it is. That's
Yeah, if you go on a Promethean site, which we use, because we use a Promethean cast with our panels, because it's pretty intuitive and doesn't require any setup whatsoever. But they've partnered with them for. It's a shame that slides and what's it called? The other one, it don't merge together. What's it called? The Jamboard, isn't it? Slides and Jamboard don't sort of fuse into a whiteboarding app that you can get through Meet. I think that'd be really useful.
Well, you've already got the whiteboarding app, haven't you? But yeah.
So that's one of the things that sort of Teams has within it, doesn't it? A whiteboarding, which is very useful. It's a bit clunky, I think, at the moment. Google Meet whiteboarding.
My suspicion is that Miro is their offering currently.
Yeah.
I do wonder whether, and it's interesting that it's the only one that's currently in the Meet options, isn't it? So I wonder whether they're thinking long term they might buy it. Who knows?
Who knows? Watch your space, eh?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, James. That's very kind. Maybe I'll take another day off ill.
Hey, Paul, you should never do live demos. Everybody knows that. You should never do live demos. So I'm setting you up here for a fall. But those drop-down chips in Sheets that you mentioned, are they live? Are they live now?
They are indeed, yeah.
Is there any chance you can just maybe just show us an example of that? Something I think something I'd probably use, and it might be worth just letting people either on the call or not on the call who watch this back just have a quick scan at that, because I think it could be a fairly useful feature, that actually.
Yeah, let me just get a sheet up and ready. It's just loading now.
I think it's children and animals, isn't it? You shouldn't work with.
Absolutely, yeah.
In a live environment.
Which category are you in?
Well, I'm clearly a child, so it might not work here, but we'll see.
Let's just take that to a nice little bit of simple maths. Okay, so I'm going to do a self-marking quiz. The wrong way around. So shift at appears. All the things you can now add in as smart chips are there. I just start to type drop down. Drop downs appear, and it puts one in there automatically. I then got to click the drop down and select the pencil, yeah, to edit it. It's different in Sheets. That's what I would do in Docs. When I click on it, the options appear on the right here. Hopefully you can still see this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I would say answer 1, answer 2, add another item, answer 3, add another item, answer 4. So there's the 4 options. We can color code them based on whatever. That doesn't even look like it's a different color there, but we'll assume it is. Okay, and then go done. So the student comes to the self-marking quiz, looks at the quiz things, decides on the answer, puts the mark in. But the teacher could also have gone, so if that equals 4, I'll go well done. And if not, try again. All right, there we go. So if I don't forget it wrong, it tells me to try again. If I get it right, it tells me well done. The other advantage of it, of course, is that if you do use color coding, and I know this isn't in this example, but actually if this was, for example, tracking progress of a particular project or some work a student might do, if you're using color coding as an indication of amount of progress through a particular task, you've got a color view there that says, you know, lots of greens and we're partway through, or we're all complete, lots of reds, we're not complete, for example, or whatever color you chose to add, for example. What I don't know is actually if you I was going to see whether I'm just going to add another item to this one. Yes, it does. So hopefully you can see that this works exactly the same as it does in Google Docs. If you can see, I've now got 6 drop downs because I dragged it down to copy it. And if you make the change to 1, it says, well, do you want to apply it just to that particular one, that instance, or do you want to apply it to them all? And by going apply to all, they'll now all have 5 as an option at the bottom. So if you forgot to add an option into a particular thing, or there's an extra level of control you want to add to a particular tracking drop down, for example, then you can add it in. You can add it to them all without necessarily having to add it to every single individual one. It knows that you've done a copy of them. It's really rather neat.
Mm-hmm. No, that's really good. I think other than turning my head into a strawberry, Paul, that's my favorite update. That's my favorite update. That's really useful actually.
Am I being a bar humbug about the strawberry? Do we really need kids to be arriving in meats?
Maybe not, but
strawberry or a log.
I was just thinking I might add that when I'm doing renewals. Forget the security and analytics updates. Forget the teaching and learning tools. You can now turn yourself into a strawberry. I
just want to know, is there a potato option?
Yeah.
It's a bit mad, isn't it? A bit mad, but there we go. Oh well. But, no, it's really good. Excellent. Yeah.
I mean, the other thing with all of these things, I mean, particularly with the smart chips, I think, I mean, for Andy and Carl and Jason and Damien, you've got a training implication for these as well, I think, because it does. We've said it on this call, haven't we? It adds efficiency to the way that you work within that particular app. But if your staff don't actually know, and actually there's that whole thing, isn't there, that I remember years ago being told by someone at Google that they expect to tell someone something 7 times before they kind of take it on board, you know, and actually just, you know, sending out a video. I send videos out all the time. I do exactly the same, but it's insufficient to to get people to think, oh, let's just have a go. And until they've had a go a few times and it's kind of in their psyche, they don't start to benefit from these efficiencies that are being built into Google all the time. So
I think with those efficiencies, there's a lot of instances where, because maybe the teaching staff don't use that a lot in their everyday work, unless because a lot of the tracking and things are done on MISs that just don't sort of get that. It's maybe more to the support staff who use some of the embedded features within Google Workspace like that.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. I'm just being quite general there, but I think the most of their work, no, they don't do that. So it's a missed area really about how we reach that. But I think those, going back to your other item that you presented about the sort of best practice in the classroom and things, those links on there for how people are showing to use Google Workspace in the classroom, they're really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
To get people excited about the way that they could adapt the way that they deliver their learning in the classroom. So
yeah, absolutely, and I agree. Yeah. But with all these things, I mean, I suppose that's your challenge, isn't it? In your roles and your skills, your next step is now I've found these new tools. How do I actually make sure that those staff that will benefit from them are aware and actually are starting to use them?
Yeah,
that's always the next step, isn't it? It's one thing for you to know, but you need your staff to know.
We'll wait to see what the old chatbot ChatGPT.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I was having to play with that this weekend. I did a thing on do you know The Flea by Ogden Nash?
I know what, sorry?
The Flea. It's a poem by Ogden Nash called The Flea.
No, I don't know that.
It's called Adam. It says Adam, Adam.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the entire poem. This is how Ogden Nash. And that's how I thought, because there's lots of people have been posting stuff about, we're talking about GPT, Steve. And lots of people are posting stuff about science things they've done and maths things they've done. And my default with all of these AI things is to immediately go to the arts. So I asked it to do a critical analysis of The Flea by Ogden Nash, and it did Flies by someone else. I can't even think of the other one person is. It then misquoted The Flea. It quoted Jonathan Swift, who talks about fleas on fleas ad infinitum, that bit, which is another completely different quote. So actually, whilst everything it said read as a perfectly legitimate piece of text, it was talking about completely the wrong poem.
Yeah, I see Steve's popped his head up. I mean, Dan Fitzpatrick's been doing some really good stuff on ChatGPT and sort of breaking the mold about really showing what can be done and how it can be beneficial to teaching staff to claw back, time, and as a real aid for that and as a discussion point. And I think that's been some fantastic stuff. And your last podcast, Steve, was another mind-blowing one, really.
Yeah, I don't want to muddy the waters between. Hi, everybody. For those people I don't know, Happy New Year. It's artificial intelligence is something I know a little bit about. I've spent, obviously, for those people who know me, I'm the CEO of C Learning, but also a director of EduFuturist and the work they're doing. So I don't want to muddy the waters and confuse people in terms of some of the stuff. But spent the last 4 or 5 years exploring the future of education, from online learning, artificial intelligence, and everything else in between. Artificial intelligence will change the future of education significantly. Chat GTP is an example of it. There are always, with positives, there are cons to it. So where the data is, it is, Paul. It is. It will continue to do so. I think it's how open we are to change will be a bit. I think in England, we're stuck in our ways a little bit more. Correct me if I'm wrong, than some, based on our narrative and our focus and our push from our particular government at the time. But if you look at transactional elements of education. So Andy, I know you'll have open days, and so will everybody on the call. What does that look like for larger organizations? Where's I've done my timetable, I don't know what classroom I'm in, all of those kind of experiences that will change, and Bolton College is doing some great work already on that. But like any artificial intelligence, the machine that's doing the work is always intelligent as the data that's input and the questions that you ask. So I think it will be so important that if you put in write a poem, as Paul, I caught the last end of it, but you don't specify which person you want it to be, what reference you want it to be, then actually it will search everything that's been on the internet since the formation of that particular tool. But ChatGPT and the OpenAI team is an interesting one because you can also put parameters in. I don't know if anybody's had a play and a bit of exploration around it, but you can say, write it in this way, consider this, add empathy, add these kind of parameters, and if you specify, it will save so much time. And I think time saving, there is, I think it was done in 2019, the average teacher works 57 hours based on the survey. 57 hours a week. Well, you're not in a school or a college building for that length of time. So generally, you might be looking at 20 hours additional outside of the building. How can it reduce those 20 hours to be more efficient and focus on still the same amount of hours, if not more, in the classroom, but remove planning, assessment, feedback, and all of those bits of work? And I think we're in a position. We also have I think they call it a war of retention and recruitment. We're struggling to recruit teachers, but we're also struggling to retain teachers. How can artificial intelligence and technology play a part to bridge the gap in the current climate and the current climate until we get to that point? Even if we were to recruit brand new teachers right now, it's probably a year or two in the making to get them trained up to where we need them to be and experienced. So we've already got a void of 2 years. So yeah, it's something I've explored and appreciate. I know that you're a newsletter receiver.
It's a really exciting time, I think, Steve, really about introducing AI for things like, rather than people searching for an email or a spreadsheet or whatever, or clicking on the MIS, to be able to say interactively to some sort of AI, tell me the students that are not in school today in my teaching group XYZ, or tell me the students on this particular report that require intervention because they haven't achieved ABC or whatever, rather than the spreadsheet crunching that a lot of teachers really don't like. And that's understandable. If we could employ AI for some really discrete, tailored questioning, and that could support it with the responses from your MIS or from Google Classroom or from search engines, how fantastic would that be? And I think that's a massive step forward that we'll see in the next couple of years.
Yeah, and you have to be open to it. As I've said, with any technology, you have to have an open mind. I remember when I delivered when I was in education at the time, and I think it was 2015. I delivered a presentation to the staff body and what we call co-professionals. So those people are in a classroom and around the peripheries of supporting education, but weren't teachers at Leeds. And we talked about teachers won't be replaced by technology, but those teachers that use it will. And you have to have an open mind in terms of the positives. And some of the feedback from some of the edufuturists or to the edufuturists have been interesting, where I've put all of this stuff in place and it's I've had to check it for 5 minutes because some of the bits seem incorrect. Well, yes, but it saved an hour for you to then check for 5 minutes. So for every hour that you've normally spent, you're saving 55 minutes. But you have to be open that it's a tool to aid and support. It's not going to do everything for you, and you have to have the human intelligence to check and work through it. But to save 55 minutes in total, or 50 minutes out of every hour for those tasks, still seems a benefit to me. But for some, it's a potential barrier of why they won't use it.
Yeah, it's like the same with Google searches, isn't it? It's not cheating, but you need to verify the source and information and the context it was in. It'd be the same with this. It's a tool to use. I think it's really, really exciting.
Has anyone tried specifying reading age when you've done ask it to create
Yeah.
something?
Yeah, I think Dan has.
Fascinating.
Yeah, and it does. So it's an interesting one. And we've also behind the scenes tested it and looked at teachers across all experience groups. So I think we're going to be having a potential discussion about it in mid-February. So we've reached out to some teachers. One of them was Ben's dad, who's close to retirement age, and he's a primary Ben Whittaker, and his dad checked and said, "What would you, based on these parameters that we put in, what would you plan?" And we got him to kind of do a bit of a plan, and then we looked at the artificial intelligence, and it was pretty close. And he just went, "If only this had been in existence for the whole of my career." How frustrating! But you can only use the tools that exist, can't you? But like I said, a DPA, I don't know whether it exists on it because it's not an education tool. We have to be honest about that. You know, it sits. I think that the data sits in America, so we have to explore that. It will have potential bias based on the information where it sources it, and it also tendency will search the internet and a source for something. So if you have over a period of time fed incorrect information and stuff that exists, it could potentially create a definition or a quote from somebody that never even said it. So you have to be mindful of some of the connotations and some of the potential risks to it. But it's exciting.
It's an astonishing. I mean, I'm not wishing to be rude, Andy, but I suspect you remember bander machines.
Yeah, I do.
So at one end of our career, we've got bander machines. I was very excited to get specially printed music line bander sheets, so I could actually write proper music onto the thing and then do me copies. So the stink of the bander machine at one end, getting high on a Monday morning, to asking a computer to say, "Would you mind making me a worksheet, please? Here are the parameters." In a single career, that's an amazing journey, isn't it, for us?
Yeah. From trichloroethylene, was it, in bander machine? Yeah, that's a banned substance now because it melts your skin and nose.
It does.
I mean, all of that is just part of the evolution of where we're going from, and to me, you know, you come back to the introduction of the calculator, and it'll be people cheating, and now they're accepted. You know, we've got to embrace the technology, and like any tool, it's only really as good as the.
I was one of the first years to do an O level where we were allowed to take a calculator in. 76, I did my O levels, and I remember it wasn't the first year, but even then, after a few years, I was at a grammar school. The teachers were still slightly disgusted that we were allowed to take a calculator in.
Yeah.
And you think if you suggested that to an exam board now, say, "Yeah, oh no, we're not going to let them use calculators."
Yeah. I mean, I think that coupled with it, it might get some change in what are the outcomes that we want for students, and the fact that the path that we're going on, where it's more at the moment seems to be directed to, you know, chalk and talk and learning the 10 facts about this particular subject or topic and testing them. You know, if we move away from a model into creating a love and a passion and a knowledge and a thirst for absorbing all of that is for that subject, and we get back to that model, then
absolutely,
tools like this are going to become increasingly useful to get that engaging discussion and feedback and in the classroom, rather than this no, we're just totally focused on exam performance at the end of the day and those incremental steps to get there. So I think it's really exciting.
Yeah, no, I agree. It is definitely. Have you had a chance to have a play, Jason? Have you had a chance to have a play, Damien?
Sorry, Paul. No, I haven't.
You haven't.
No.
I sent the link to a friend of mine last night, and she did say that it was she couldn't log on. So I don't know whether they've got a specified number of registered people and they've met that limit, or what, or it was just the servers were too busy last night.
You also have to create an account using, I think it's over 2. So I think you'd have to use there might be education providers. So for example, Andy, I'd just be mindful of checking using your Hippo Home account as an example. Like I haven't used my e-learning account because ultimately to give it's only a single sign-on, so it's not pulling any data. You don't have to, but I think some education organisations might block what you can sign into using it. So that might be something to check. But they've not hit the quota. It's owned by OpenAI, and I think there is talk that will be purchased and sold as a company. I don't know whether GTP as a separate entity will be sold, but there's talk of 27.8 billion in terms of what it'll reach in terms of just that piece of software. So it'll become a unicorn. I don't know if everybody's familiar with that term, but as a business, it's one that's gone within a certain period of time and sold for billions, and it will become, it'll sit in the top 10 unicorn companies.
Well, Microsoft invested 1 billion in it, didn't they? As a joint venture, and they're now talking about whether they're going to introduce it into Microsoft Edge.
Yeah.
And Google must be really thinking, well, is it time to unleash our AI bot?
Yeah, because it's open source, there are APIs linking into it. I think there's already somebody that's created an extension. I don't think Google have done it themselves, but there's an extension where you can link it into a Google search. But yeah, it's fascinating. I think the only other big one that you'll see that's a unicorn in education, I think, is Canva or Canvas, the one that the kind of creation software and the Canva is a wonderful tool, and that's a £1 billion unicorn. Set by, I think, somebody in Australia. I think it was New Zealand, actually, female in New Zealand. So some great tools in education to help. We just have to be open.
Social media as well.
Yeah.
Right. Interesting times, huh?
It is exciting times. But again, just to add, because I think we're recording and a transcript at C Learning is not selling a subscription to Chat GTP, and also our advice and our conversations are not advocating the use. It's entirely up to yourselves to think about what that looks like. And my work as a futurist is separate. But more than happy if somebody wants to reach out. It does transcend my knowledge and the work that I do across. But yeah, feel free to ask any questions, and let's see if we can connect you with the right people to do so. There's plenty of stuff going on. I think it's one of those things that's gone viral over the last month, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is fascinating. Like you say, requesting it to add in empathy. I asked it to add in. It still got the wrong poet, because the reason I chose Fleas is there are 3 Fleas poems. One by Pope, there's one by John Donne, there's one by Ogden Nash, you see. So I was wanting to see whether it found the right one. And I did specify Ogden Nash in my search criteria, but then I asked it to add in quotes, and it put some quotes in from Ogden Nash, but from some of his other poems, and then some from Pope. So it's fascinating. But I think the potential of AI is just huge, isn't it? That's the reality of it. And I think what it does in my mind is it reminds us that the value we bring to any interaction in the education space is our humanity. And that whole checking process, is it the right question to ask him at this time? Is it? Yeah, I get that's what I've asked for. You give me what I want, but actually, no, I've seen it on the paper. I think actually it might be better to do it in that order. It might be better not to ask that question just yet, or because your knowledge of those individuals in your classroom is something that Chat GPT won't necessarily have, because you won't necessarily be able to feed in all that information in a way that it can actually access it and process it. Plus all the 1,001 variables that happen in the classroom, that they had a row with their mum before they came to school, and all those other things, that you just can't, you can't allow for. But it's definitely got huge potential, and like I say, it's already there, isn't it? Those smart chips that we talked about earlier that are now beginning to appear more and more in Google Sheets as well as Google Docs. This is Google's AI doing that work for you. That's suggesting responses. Yeah.
And practice learning sets. I think, it's a great one. It's a great one. Yes. And that whole thing, Paul, it really resonates with me in terms of human intelligence versus artificial intelligence. As artificial intelligence develops, how can we create and ensure our education system in this country and globally is creating better human intelligence and skills that provide not necessarily just the ability to retain and regurgitate information. And I did work prior to C Learning in terms of some of the teacher training organisations and universities around the ability to develop human intelligence in education and around the peripheries and the shackles of our system. So yeah, I love it. I could talk about this all day long. But,
no, it is. It's fascinating. So I'm going to wind up, if I may. We're only a couple of minutes from the hour. Thank you very much. Welcome, Damien from CCP. Lovely to meet you for the first time. Do please come and join us next time. Chris will send out the recording as always and the slide deck, so you'll have all the links to all the things that I've talked about today. Fantastic discussion at the end, not on any of the topics in terms of the updates, but a brilliant conversation nevertheless. And thanks for your contributions all. And I look forward to seeing some of you maybe tomorrow for the Techie Tuesday updates, and if not, next month on the 6th of February for the user interface updates then. Thanks very much for your time, everyone. Take care.
Alan.
Thank you. Bye.